Have you ever been betrayed by the one person who promised to protect you? Have you ever watched someone you loved humiliate you in front of the world, like your entire history with them meant absolutely nothing? Yeah, that kind of betrayal. Now imagine it happening in public, in front of flashing cameras, at a glamorous rooftop gala where the whole industry's watching, and you're not even in the room to defend yourself. That's what happened to her, to Elise Moreau. Her ex-husband, walked in smiling with his new fiancée. And when the cameras asked who she was, he didn't just show off his arm candy. He laughed at Elise, called her a charity case, said he'd traded up, and everyone heard it. He thought she'd stay silent. He thought she was gone. But let me tell you something. He didn't just wake the woman he left. He woke the icon she was always meant to become. And in just 72 hours, the world would flip. Because when Vogue released their September cover, it wasn't his new fiancée's face on it. It was hers. Elise Moreau, icon of the year. So ask yourself this: when someone publicly tears you down, what would it look like if you didn't just survive? What if you came back and made them regret ever opening their mouth? Stay with me, because this story, it's not just revenge, it's rebirth. Cameras flashed like wildfire. Celebrities posed in designer gowns. Champagne flowed like water. But the real headline that night wasn't the award show, nor the guest list. It was what Jeremy Langston did. He walked in with his new fiancée, Madison Reeve. Tall, thin, blonde. A former reality TV star turned influencer with over 3 million Instagram followers and a recent skincare line nobody took seriously. But tonight, she wasn't just arm candy. She was Jeremy's trophy, and he wanted everyone to know it. As they strolled past the velvet ropes, Jeremy stopped to give a quick interview. "Jeremy, looking sharp. And who's this stunning woman on your arm?" Jeremy smirked. "This is Madison, my future wife. Isn't she gorgeous? I guess you trade up when you stop dating. Well, charity cases." The reporter laughed awkwardly, unsure if he had heard right. But Jeremy didn't stop there. "She's not just beautiful, she's cultured, polished, Vogue-ready, not like my ex, always playing pretend, shopping thrift stores like it was an aesthetic. I mean, come on." The reporter blinked. The camera kept rolling. Inside the ballroom, the whisper started. Did he just say that on camera? About his ex-wife? Isn't that Elise Moreau? Yes, Elise, the woman Jeremy had been married to for 7 years. The woman who had quietly supported his early career. The woman he had left without a word, without warning. Just a note on the counter and Madison in his bed. At that moment, Elise wasn't even in the building. She had declined the invite. No interest in publicity, her PR rep had said. Elise is focused on her philanthropic work and creative direction. But the universe has a taste for irony. Because just 72 hours later, everything would change. Just when Jeremy thought he had buried her image under a mountain of red carpet photos and influencer gossip blogs, Vogue dropped the bombshell of the year. On its September cover, with bold black letters that screamed louder than Jeremy's arrogance. Elise Moreau, icon of the year. The photo? Elise, poised and powerful in a crimson Balenciaga trench coat, eyes sharp, lips fierce. Shot in Paris, styled by the legendary Ricardo Leclerc. A cover so striking it broke the internet in under an hour. But the headline wasn't the twist. The article was. Inside, readers discovered a story far richer than tabloids had ever told. Elise wasn't the quiet, boho ex-wife Jeremy had reduced her to. She was a former fashion editor, a textile scholar, and the anonymous mind behind several of the last decade's most viral, sustainable fashion campaigns. She had walked away from Jeremy, yes, but she hadn't crumbled. She had created. Elise didn't just survive the betrayal, she turned it into an empire. The internet exploded. Elise deserved better trended globally within hours. Celebrities reposted the Vogue cover with captions like, "The Queen returns," and "Now this is what an icon looks like." Madison Reeve, caught in the crossfire, turned off her Instagram comments. Jeremy released a statement that read more like damage control than regret. "We support Elise's success," he said. "There's room for everyone at the top." But the world had already decided. There was Elise, and then there was everyone else. Before the Vogue cover, before the headlines and hashtags, Elise Moreau was invisible. By choice. She lived on the 5th floor of an old brownstone in Brooklyn's Cobble Hill, in an apartment that smelled like jasmine tea and old books. The windows were slightly crooked, the radiator hissed in winter, and the floors creaked under the weight of her memories. But it was home. Quiet, safe, hers. She was 33 years old, French-American, and had the kind of beauty that was more compelling than pretty. Sharp cheekbones, eyes the color of overcast skies, and hair that fell in soft waves down her back. But she rarely wore makeup. Her daily uniform was a linen blouse, worn jeans, and boots that had seen better days. People often mistook her for a barista, an art student, or someone creative but broke. She never corrected them. Because Elise had no interest in being seen. Not yet. She worked as a freelance textile consultant, mostly under pseudonyms. Brands hired her for her eye, her ability to identify fabric compositions by touch, her deep understanding of sustainability, and her subtle genius for blending texture, heritage, and narrative into modern design. She had ghostwritten entire style guides for major fashion houses. Her name didn't appear on press releases, but her fingerprints were everywhere. It hadn't always been this way. 5 years ago, Elise was the creative director at Atelier Lamont, one of Paris's most respected design houses. She walked the runways, consulted for Vogue Paris, and had her own office overlooking the Seine. She was the youngest board member in the company's history. Her collections were praised for their emotional storytelling and ethical sourcing. Anna Wintour herself once described Elise's work as quietly revolutionary. But she left it all, voluntarily. Why? One word. Jeremy. Jeremy Langston was visiting Paris for a startup summit when they met. He was charming, ambitious, and completely out of his depth in her world. Elise found that endearing. He was from Chicago, a tech founder who had just raised his first $1 million in funding. She thought he was refreshingly unpolished. He thought she was the most elegant woman he'd ever seen. They fell hard fast. Within 3 months, Elise left Paris. She packed up her apartment, quit her job, and moved to Manhattan with him. She told no one, not even her closest colleagues, why. Love, she said. Simplicity? A fresh start. But the truth was more complicated. Elise was exhausted by the pressure, the politics, the performative nature of fashion. She wanted to be invisible for a while. She wanted to love someone who didn't see her as a brand, but as a woman. Jeremy promised her that. He asked her to marry him one rainy afternoon in Central Park, barefoot and laughing, with a silver ring he bought from a street vendor. She said yes. They married 6 months later in a quiet courthouse ceremony. No press, no gown, just the two of them, and later, takeout from her favorite Thai place. For a while, it was bliss. Elise traded designer fittings for Sunday markets. She wrote anonymous articles about sustainable fashion under pen names. She volunteered at a textile recycling center in the Bronx. She grew basil on the windowsill. She kissed Jeremy on the forehead every morning before his meetings. She thought they were building something real. But cracks appeared early. Jeremy grew restless. He was always reaching for the next round of funding, the next validation. As his company grew, so did his ego. He started working late, traveling more, posting carefully curated photos of his life as a self-made CEO. Elise noticed how he'd crop her out of group pictures, how he'd introduce her as, "My wife Elise, she's kind of into fashion stuff." How he started using words like rebrand when talking about their image. The final blow came at a holiday party 2 years into their marriage. Elise overheard Jeremy telling an investor, "Yeah, Elise used to be in fashion. She's kind of retired now, more of a housewife vibe, but hey, she makes a great risotto." That night, Elise didn't cry. She packed a suitcase and left the apartment. She didn't leave a note. She didn't ask for alimony. She took nothing but her passport, her sketchbooks, and a single worn photo of her mother. Because Jeremy never knew the truth. Elise Moreau wasn't just some retired fashion girl. She was the only daughter of Elise Moreau, the legendary fabric historian who revolutionized sustainable luxury in the 90s. Her mother died when Elise was 16, leaving her with nothing but a legacy and a suitcase full of silk swatches from every continent. Elise built her career from that suitcase. She never cashed in on her last name. She never told Jeremy who her mother was. She wanted someone to love her without the weight of history, without the burden of brilliance. Instead, she got betrayal. But betrayal has a funny way of awakening buried fire. After she left Jeremy, Elise returned to Paris for a year, quietly. She didn't announce her arrival. She rented a flat in Montmartre, spent her mornings at textile archives, and her nights sketching collections no one would see. For now, she started a ghost design firm called Celine Atelier, named after her mother. She consulted under NDAs, designing for brands that couldn't publicly afford her but desperately needed her eye. She reinvested everything she made into a secret project, a project that, when finally revealed, would change everything. It was called The Red Line, a minimalist, ethically made, gender-neutral fashion line inspired by textile activism, refugee stories, and generational loss. Every piece came with a digital code that traced its fabric's journey. No models, no influencers, just powerful storytelling and impeccable craftsmanship. When Vogue caught wind of it, they begged to meet the anonymous designer. Elise said no. Then Anna Wintour herself sent an email. Elise didn't reply. But the world has a way of finding the truth. One of Elise's designs worn by an actress on the Cannes red carpet went viral. Everyone wanted to know, who is behind the red line? A month later, Vogue confirmed what fashion insiders already suspected. It was Elise, the girl who had vanished, the woman who never stopped creating, the icon nobody saw coming. The air shimmered with perfume, secrets, and power. It was the annual Vanguard Gala, a night reserved only for the elite. Held at the newly renovated Marquette Mansion in the Upper East Side, the event was as much a display of opulence as it was a chessboard of social strategy. Every guest wasn't just invited. They were curated, hand-picked like jewels for their influence, their image, and the whispers they inspired. The mansion itself was a spectacle. Built in 1894 and recently restored for a rumored $42 million, it stood like a marble fortress against the Manhattan skyline. The front doors, 30 feet tall and carved with mythological figures, opened into a vast atrium bathed in gold light and echoing with a live string quartet. Crystal chandeliers the size of cars hung from frescoed ceilings. Velvet curtains framed floor-to-ceiling windows that revealed sweeping views of the Hudson River. Every table was topped with rare orchids flown in from Japan, and the champagne, Krug 1979, flowed like a river of liquid diamonds. The dress code, couture only. Women floated in gowns that cost more than cars. Men arrived in custom tuxedos stitched with their initials inside the lining. Fashion houses fought for their clients to be seen here, because being seen at the Vanguard wasn't just status, it was declaration. And this year, there was one seat everyone was watching. Table 7. Dead center, right under the main chandelier. Reserved for the sponsors of the event's most anticipated segment, the Future of Fashion Award. Sitting at the head of that table? Jeremy Langston. Dressed in a sharp black Tom Ford suit, his hair gelled to perfection, he looked every inch the tech mogul he pretended to be. But his usual smug confidence was magnified tonight. Because on his arm, wearing a metallic gold dress so tight it looked vacuum-sealed, was Madison Reeve, his new fiancée. Jeremy was grinning like he had already won something. Cameras followed them all evening. Madison posed like she was born to be famous. Every time someone greeted them, Jeremy made sure to mention the word rebrand, luxury startup, or exclusive collab. He even slipped in a few jabs about his ex-wife. "She's more of a minimalist," he told a guest with a forced chuckle. "Not really her kind of scene. She's into recycled fabrics now." The room chuckled politely. What Jeremy didn't know, what no one knew, was that Elise Moreau was already in the building, not as a guest, as the guest. She had arrived 20 minutes earlier, slipping through a side entrance escorted by Lucien Grant, the newly appointed editor-in-chief of Vogue. She wore no jewelry except a vintage Cartier watch. Her black gown, designed by her own atelier, was floor-length silk with an asymmetrical neckline and an embroidered crimson thread running from collarbone to ankle. A silent reference to the red line, her now iconic label. The effect was devastating. She didn't walk. She glided. The room didn't notice her at first. Elise had always been quiet, anti-flash, but as she passed from one marble hallway into the main ballroom, the energy shifted. People paused mid-sentence. Glasses were lowered. Heads turned like magnets pulled toward a center of gravity. Madison was in the middle of filming an Instagram story when she noticed the silence. "What's everyone looking?" Then she saw Elise. Her mouth parted slightly. For a moment, she looked like a doll whose batteries had just died. Jeremy turned his head, expecting some celebrity, and froze. Elise looked directly at him. No smile, No hostility, just an ocean of calm power behind steel-gray eyes. Jeremy's mouth moved, but no sound came out. For the first time in years, he had no script. Elise didn't stop. She walked past him, past the table, past the flashbulbs, past the whispers, until she reached the main stage. Lucien helped her ascend the marble steps. A hush fell over the room. The music faded. Then Lucien took the mic. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, his French accent rich and smooth. "Tonight, we honor not just innovation in fashion, but transformation, resilience, and power." He turned to Elise. "Tonight, Vogue officially names Elise Moreau our icon of the year." Applause exploded. Flashbulbs detonated. Jeremy's face turned pale. Madison blinked, stunned, her fingers frozen mid-scroll on her phone. Elise stepped forward. She didn't give a dramatic speech, no emotional confessions. She simply accepted the Crystal Award, looked into the audience, and said, "Thank you. Not for the title, but for finally seeing what's always been there." The room erupted again, but Jeremy couldn't hear it. His ears rang with a memory. "You'll never make it without me." He had said that to Elise the night she left. Now she stood, applauded by titans, draped in her own empire, holding the highest honor in fashion. Without him. The gala continued. Elise returned to her seat, table 1, far more prestigious than Jeremy's, and spent the rest of the evening surrounded by visionaries. Editors, designers, and philanthropists flocked to her table. Jeremy? No one asked him anything after that. Even Madison looked annoyed, scrolling through Elise's name now trending on every platform. By midnight, Vogue had posted the first official photo from the gala. Elise standing alone bathed in light. The caption, "When Grace Outlives Gossip, Icon of the Year." Jeremy Langston had always been charming. That was his weapon, his smile. He could make a room forget their own names with one wink and a well-timed compliment. He was the kind of man who seemed harmless at first, the kind who opened doors, remembered birthdays, and quoted motivational books like gospel. But behind that glint in his eye was something far darker. A hunger that no success could satisfy. Jeremy wasn't born rich. He grew up in a middle-class suburb of Chicago, the son of a school teacher and a failed salesman. He hated that life. The hand-me-down clothes, the second-hand car, the way his father drank too much on Friday nights, and blamed the world for his own mediocrity. From a young age, Jeremy promised himself he'd never be small, never be average. And if that meant playing dirty, so be it. He started his first company in college. It failed. So did the next two. But he knew how to spin failure into experience, how to make disappointment look like resilience. Investors liked his pitch, even when it was all smoke. And eventually, one startup stuck, barely. A tech company offering AI for customer support. Not glamorous, but scalable. Then came Elise. When he met her in Paris, he was broke but smooth-talking. She was established, brilliant, mysterious. She carried herself like someone born into power, but not intoxicated by it. Jeremy saw her not just as a woman, but as a brand. She had connections, prestige, the kind of reputation that couldn't be bought. She was the upgrade he'd been chasing his whole life, and she fell for him. To Jeremy, Elise was both a shortcut and a trophy. He convinced her to leave Paris. He convinced her to start fresh in New York. He convinced her to give up her name because he needed her to disappear. Not physically, but publicly. If Elise Moreau was invisible, then Jeremy Langston could shine brighter. For a while, it worked. He used her insights, her instincts, even her old contacts. She helped him land 3 major clients without ever asking for credit. She designed his first pitch deck. She edited his proposals. She built the brand image he flaunted. And when he started getting attention, he erased her. Slowly, subtly, he stopped introducing her in meetings. He began saying, "my team," instead of Elise and I. When people asked what she did, he shrugged and said she was exploring her passions. He wanted her quiet, beautiful, and behind him. A backdrop, not a partner. But Jeremy's betrayal wasn't just about erasure. It was about replacement. Enter Madison Reeve. Madison had been Elise's friend, not best friend. Elise didn't keep those, but a close enough presence to be trusted. They met at a sustainable fashion summit 2 years prior. Madison was a rising influencer who'd rebranded herself from a scandal-ridden reality TV star to a green fashion advocate. Elise, always generous with underdogs, offered guidance. She helped Madison network, introduced her to eco-label founders, even invited her to one of Vogue's fundraising galas. That's where it began. Jeremy was drawn to Madison's loudness. Her thirst. She wasn't elegant, but she was magnetic in her own way. She didn't challenge him like Elise did. She flattered him. She reposted his quotes, praised him online, laughed too hard at his jokes. She didn't understand subtlety, and Jeremy loved that. Because it meant control. It started with texts, then work dinners, then trips. Elise noticed, of course, the late nights, the vague explanations, the perfume on his coat that wasn't hers. But what shattered her wasn't the affair itself. It was who he chose, her friend. When Elise confronted Jeremy, he didn't deny it. He didn't even look guilty. "You've changed," he said. "You used to support me. Now it's all lectures and silence. I need someone who sees me." "She was my friend," Elise whispered. Jeremy shrugged. "She's what I need now. No apology, no remorse." The next morning, Elise was gone. Jeremy, unbothered, told people she needed time. He painted himself as a husband abandoned by a woman who didn't know what she wanted anymore. Madison moved into Elise's old space 3 weeks later. She redecorated, replaced the silk curtains with velvet, turned Elise's sunroom studio into a makeup filming corner. Madison didn't feel guilty. She felt validated. She told friends, Elise was too cold. Jeremy deserves someone who believes in him. She even tweeted a quote the week Elise left. "Sometimes you have to lose the past to find your future." It went viral, for all the wrong reasons. Publicly, they tried to position themselves as a power couple. Jeremy invested in Madison's skincare brand. She appeared beside him in magazines as CEO and muse. They staged photo ops, pretended to volunteer at children's hospitals, co-hosted charity brunches. But the cracks were already there. Madison wanted fame, Jeremy wanted status. Neither really wanted each other. They just wanted the idea of each other. And the one thing that united them? Their shared belief that Elise was never coming back. They were wrong, because Elise hadn't disappeared. She had transformed. And when Vogue crowned her Icon of the Year, it didn't just elevate Elise, it exposed them. People remembered. People compared. Side-by-side photos of Elise's Vogue cover and Madison's paparazzi shots flooded Twitter. One tweet said, "He left a legacy for a filter." Another, "Elise writes history. Madison edits reels." Even Madison's fans started asking uncomfortable questions. Her Instagram engagement plummeted. Brands quietly pulled out. Jeremy's investors suddenly stopped returning calls. Behind closed doors, the power couple panicked. Madison accused Jeremy of using her. Jeremy blamed her for the backlash. They fought, screamed. Madison threw a limited edition lamp. Jeremy canceled a joint campaign deal. The foundation they built, their whole image, wasn't just shaking, it was collapsing. And the best part? Elise didn't have to lift a finger. She simply stood tall, let the truth breathe, and watched the empire built on betrayal crumble under its own weight. Because karma doesn't rush, but it always arrives. It wasn't supposed to be her night. Elise had spent the day preparing for a charity art exhibit she had quietly helped curate, an event showcasing works by underprivileged youth from Brooklyn and Harlem. She wasn't the face of the exhibit by design. She believed in giving others the spotlight. She wore a simple black dress, her hair in a loose bun, no makeup, just a hint of rose lip balm. That was her style. Understated elegance, let the work speak kind of grace. But her night changed the moment she received the text. From her assistant, Camille. "You should come to the Tech launch party. Jeremy is about to make it very public." Elise stared at the screen, confused. She hadn't heard from Jeremy in nearly 6 months, not since the final divorce papers were signed. He had insisted on no media circus, no press, no drama. "Let's keep this clean," he'd said. Now he was making it public? Against her better judgment, Elise left the art gallery and took a cab downtown. The Tech party was being held at the Sky Deck, a luxury rooftop lounge known for its exclusive guest list, panoramic views of Manhattan, and extremely public social media exposure. She arrived around 9:30 p.m. As she stepped off the elevator and into the sleek, glass-walled venue, the buzz hit her like a wave. Camera crews, champagne flutes clinking, influencers taking selfies under neon signs that read, "Build the Future." And right in the center of it all, Jeremy and Madison. They were standing on a small elevated stage, bathed in soft gold light. Madison wore a sparkling emerald gown, slit high, neckline plunging. Jeremy was in a pale gray suit, his signature smirk firmly in place. Elise watched from the shadows as a young tech journalist approached with a microphone. And now, the moment we've all been waiting for. A send text, new direction, and its new face. Jeremy, what's next? Jeremy laughed softly, then pulled Madison closer by the waist. He said, I've always believed in innovation, not just in tech, but in life. Laughter. He continued, tonight I want to introduce someone who embodies that vision. She's not just beautiful, she's brilliant. She's the future, my inspiration, my soon-to-be wife, Madison Reeve. Gasps, applause, flashbulbs. Jeremy kissed Madison long and deliberately. The crowd clapped. Someone yelled, power couple, and then he dropped the final blow. I used to think success meant doing everything alone, but then I realized it's about finding the right partner. Someone who matches you. Someone who's not afraid to be seen. Who doesn't hide behind recycled ideas and beige philosophies. The crowd laughed, some politely, others nervously. Elise stood frozen. She knew who he was talking about. Everyone did. That wasn't just a low blow, it was a calculated missile. He had used her life's work, sustainability, humility, quiet impact, as a punchline. And done it in front of an entire room of cameras. Jeremy saw her. Their eyes met across the rooftop. His smile faltered, just slightly. Madison, turning, followed his gaze. Her expression changed the moment she saw Elise. A flicker of surprise, quickly replaced by smugness. Oh my God, someone whispered near Elise. Isn't that his ex? Elise could have turned and walked away. She could have cried in the elevator, called Camille, buried it. But something inside her shifted. She stepped forward, crossed the floor, every step like a drum beat, every heel click slicing through the chatter. By the time she reached the center of the crowd, people had already turned. Phones were recording. Whispers filled the air. Elise stopped 5 feet from the stage. Jeremy looked stunned. Hello, Jeremy, she said, her voice calm. Madison's smile tightened. Well, this is unexpected. Jeremy cleared his throat. Elise, you look real, she finished for him. She turned to the crowd. My name is Elise Moreau. I wasn't invited tonight, but it seems I was mentioned. Soft laughter rippled through the room. Since I'm here, let me correct something. I don't hide. I step aside so others can rise. There's a difference. A collective murmur. And I don't need a stage or a spotlight to be valid. I don't need champagne toasts or viral videos to make an impact. I don't need to be the future to have value in the present. She looked directly at Jeremy. I used to believe you were my partner. I used to believe you were building something that mattered. Pause. I was wrong. But mistakes are part of learning. She smiled, softly, almost sadly. So thank you, Jeremy. Thank you for teaching me what mediocrity looks like in a suit. Silence. Then one clap, then another. Then the entire room erupted into applause. Madison stood frozen, her hand twitching around her champagne flute. Jeremy turned bright red. Elise didn't wait for more. She turned, walked out, and didn't look back. That video hit the internet 10 minutes later. By midnight, it had over 3 million views. By morning, headlines read, Elise Moreau silences ex with one sentence. Jeremy Langston gets publicly destroyed, and it's delicious. Elegance wins. Jeremy tried to play it down. Called it a misunderstanding, said the comments were taken out of context. But it was too late. The internet had decided. And Elise? She went home, took off her heels, made tea, read a letter from a young girl in Morocco who said Elise's foundation had changed her life. Then she smiled, because what Jeremy didn't know was, you can't shame someone who's already free. The applause haunted her. It echoed in her mind hours after she walked off that rooftop. Even as the world cheered her composure, her class, her mic drop moment, Elise Moreau couldn't stop shaking. She got home past midnight. The city was still alive, but her brownstone apartment was eerily silent. She turned the key with trembling fingers, slipped off her heels, and dropped her bag by the door. In the living room, the city lights poured through the windows, painting soft gold lines across the hardwood floor. She didn't turn on the lights. She walked into the kitchen, filled a glass of water, and stared at the reflection of her face in the dark window. And then it hit her. Everything. The betrayal, the humiliation, the weight of staying strong when all she wanted to do was collapse. She gripped the edge of the counter and finally let the tears fall. This wasn't how it was supposed to be. Elise had spent months rebuilding her identity after the divorce. Brick by brick, quietly and without fanfare, she had reconstructed a version of herself she could live with. Not perfect, not polished, but whole, or so she thought. But seeing Jeremy up there, using her name, mocking her work, presenting her erasure as if it were entertainment, was a crack she hadn't prepared for. And the worst part? She had felt it coming. Elise had known, deep down, that Jeremy would never let her go quietly. That one day, he would twist the narrative, that he would weaponize charm and confidence against her. And still, she had walked into that party. She had stared him down. She had spoken like a queen. But now, alone in the dark, she felt like a fraud. She sank to the floor, the cold tile pressing against her bare legs, her knees pulled to her chest. She cried, not the elegant, tear-down-the-cheek kind. No, these were guttural sobs, the kind that left her gasping for breath, the kind that made her throat burn and her ribs ache, the kind she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years. Not when she left Paris. Not when she found out about Jeremy and Madison. Not even when she signed the divorce papers in silence. But now she had nothing to prove. No cameras, no audience. Just a broken woman in a quiet kitchen, finally allowing herself to break. By 2 a.m., Elise managed to crawl into bed. She didn't sleep. She stared at the ceiling, heart racing, thoughts spiraling. What if they were right? What if she really wasn't enough? What if her quiet work wasn't power, but fear? What if Madison was everything Jeremy said she was? Bold, relevant, unafraid. By sunrise, her chest was tight with anxiety. She canceled her morning meetings, ignored texts, left unread dozens of messages from designers, friends, reporters, even Lucien Grant, who simply wrote, "Are you okay?" She wasn't. She couldn't eat, couldn't breathe. The next 2 days passed in a blur. Elise stopped leaving her apartment. She shut the blinds, disconnected the buzzer. She tried to work, but every time she sat at her desk, her hands shook. She tried to design her one escape, but the sketches came out chaotic. Jagged lines, no rhythm, no soul. Even her reflection felt foreign. Her once calm face now looked hollow. Her eyes, always sharp, were rimmed red. Her posture was slumped, her spirit quieted. She told herself she just needed rest. But it wasn't just exhaustion, it was fear. A creeping, insidious voice that whispered, "You were never really the icon, just the lucky one who got there first." On the third day, Camille showed up, her assistant, her friend. She knocked until Elise opened the door, barefoot, in sweatpants, hair a mess, face pale. "Oh my God," Camille breathed. "You look awful," Elise whispered. "Human," Camille replied. "Come sit." Camille didn't lecture, didn't offer platitudes. She just sat beside Elise on the couch, held her hand, and waited. Eventually, Elise spoke. "I thought I was past it," she said. "Past him, past caring." Camille stayed silent, but the way he stood up there, like I was nothing, like everything I ever built was a phase he outgrew. "Elise," Camille said softly, "he doesn't define your worth." Elise laughed bitterly. "Then why does it hurt so much?" "Because you're real, Yulville," Camille said. "You feel things, you build things, he performs, you create." Elise wiped her eyes. "He said I hide." Camille shook her head. "You don't hide, you protect what matters." They sat in silence for a long time. Later that evening, Camille made soup. Elise ate it in small spoonfuls, grateful for the warmth. She took a shower, put on clean clothes, braided her hair, small steps, but each one mattered. That night she opened her inbox. She didn't respond to anyone, but she read the messages. A single mother in Oregon who said Elise's speech helped her walk out of a toxic marriage. A young designer in Lagos who said the red line inspired her to launch her first collection. A teenage girl in Japan who said she wrote Elise's name on her vision board. And finally, one from Lucien. Just 3 words. "Your silence roars." Elise closed her laptop. She walked to the window, opened it. The city was still there, loud, messy, alive, and so was she. For months, Elise had let the world believe she was rebuilding from nothing, that she was just a forgotten ex-wife, quietly stitching together a new life from broken pieces, that her strength came from survival, from dignity, from silence. But they didn't know the whole truth. The truth was Elise Moreau never lost anything. She had simply decided to disappear because she had something much bigger planned. And now it was time to reveal it. It started with an email from Lucien Grant. Subject line, "It's time." The message itself was brief but chillingly precise. "They think you're a story. Let's show them you're the storm." Attached was the full editorial spread for Vogue's September issue. Not the cover, everyone had already seen that, but the inside pages, the ones that truly mattered, pages that told the real story of Elise Moreau. Her childhood in Lyon, France, raised by her grandmother after her mother, Elise Moreau, the textile legend, died from cancer when Elise was just 16. Her years at the École des Arts Décoratifs, where she graduated top of her class without ever revealing her last name. The professors who said she was a genius with fabric. The under-the-table internship she took to avoid accusations of nepotism. Her complete refusal to ride on her mother's legacy. And then, her secret. The one not even Jeremy had known. Elise wasn't just an artist. She wasn't just the founder of the Red Line. She wasn't just a visionary. She was the majority stakeholder in 3 of Europe's most respected fashion production houses, all registered under a holding company based in Geneva, Lys Holdings. Lys, short for Lys Blanc, the white lily her mother used to stitch onto every prototype garment. Elise had inherited her mother's stake years ago, but she had kept it hidden, allowing the companies to run independently, quietly, efficiently, sustainably. She didn't just design clothes. She owned the factories that made them. She owned the supply chains Madison's brand relied on. She owned the dye houses Jeremy's tech-funded fashion collab had just partnered with. And now she was done staying silent. Lucien arranged it all. A private conference at the Musée des Arts Décoratifs in Paris. Exclusive invite. No media, only power players. CEOs, editors, curators. The ones who actually moved markets. Elise arrived wearing a midnight blue pantsuit tailored to perfection. Her hair slicked back. No jewelry. No branding, just presence. She took the stage with a simple statement. Fashion is not just about beauty, it's about power. And I'm done pretending I don't have any. Then she began. Slide after slide, she unveiled the Red Line's next phase. A full-scale integration with Lys Holdings. Sustainable supply chain transformation across 5 continents. A new luxury platform Noir, launching in Q1, backed by 3 international investors and designed to render fast fashion obsolete. Then came the twist. I'd also like to address a recent collaboration that's been trending, she said calmly. She clicked the remote. Jeremy's brand appeared on the screen. Next to it, a map of their production flow, highlighting every step that ran through Elise's holdings. I own 37% of the infrastructure you depend on, she said. As of next month that access is revoked. You'll need to restructure ethically or shut down. Murmurs. Lucien didn't even try to hide his smirk. Elise? Someone called out. Why now? She paused, met every eye in the room. Because I wanted to give people a chance to rise with me, she said. But if you insist on climbing over me, you'd better know whose shoulders you're standing on. News broke within hours. Lys unveiled trended worldwide. Financial blogs dissected her holdings. Fashion magazines scrambled to update their most influential lists. Legacy designers offered partnerships. Environmental groups celebrated her transparency. But the true blow came privately. To Jeremy. He received the email 3 days later. As per Clause 7.3 of the supplier agreement, your access to Redline certified manufacturing channels is terminated effective immediately. He called. He begged. Can we talk? Elise didn't answer. She didn't need to, because now he finally understood. She hadn't rebranded. She had been building an empire, while he was playing influencer with his side piece. Meanwhile, Madison tried to spin the story. Claimed she supported Elise's vision. Said they were in talks to collaborate, until a leaked recording surfaced. Madison mocking sustainable fashion at a dinner party. Elise makes peasant clothes for rich people, she laughed. Let her have her little revolution. The backlash was swift. Madison's brand lost 3 major sponsors overnight. Her Instagram follower count dropped by 200,000 in 48 hours. She locked her account, released a crying apology video. Elise never responded. She didn't need to, because power doesn't scream. It sits quietly in rooms where decisions are made, and it moves mountains with a signature. Later that week, Vogue released a behind-the-scenes video from Elise's cover shoot. In it, a stylist asked, "How do you want to be remembered?" Elise looked into the camera, calm, unshaken, as the woman they underestimated fade to black. The Elise who walked into that Vogue shoot was not the Elise the world remembered. Gone were the soft blouses, the neutral palette, the quiet gaze that once asked for nothing but to be left alone. This time she arrived in silence. But it was the kind of silence that turned heads. A black double-breasted Balmain coat cinched at the waist, knee-high leather boots, slicked back hair, and sunglasses that made no room for eye contact. She didn't dress for style anymore. She dressed for war. The studio team, world-class stylists, photographers, editors, paused mid-task when she entered. No one dared speak first. She had become an energy, a presence. The air itself shifted when she moved. Her assistant, Camille, leaned in. "Are you ready?" Elise didn't nod. She simply said, "Let's begin." It had been 6 weeks since she exposed her empire. 6 weeks since she terminated Jeremy's pipeline, dismantled Madison's PR facade, and reminded the world that fashion wasn't just fabric and followers. It was foundation, legacy, strategy. But transformation isn't just about power moves, it's about reclaiming the self, and that's exactly what Elise did. She began every morning at 5 a.m. now. Meditation, weight training, journaling, not for Instagram, not for anyone's approval, for focus, for discipline, for her. She cut out distractions, social media, gossip threads, anything that made her look outward instead of inward. Her therapist called it psychological cleansing. Elise called it the rebuild. She hired a new team, not influencers or trend chasers, but real experts. Economists, art historians, young textile engineers from underfunded programs. She created mentorships, funded grants, built labs. She wasn't just preparing a comeback, she was creating a movement. And then came the physical shift. Her new look wasn't about youth or trends. It was about command. A curated aesthetic, monochrome palettes, structure, clean cuts. Every outfit said one thing: "I've arrived, you just didn't notice." Fashion blogs took notice immediately. Elise Moreau debuts new power aesthetic, and it's a masterclass in reinvention. Elegance meets execution, the rise of Elise 2.0. But what truly marked her transformation wasn't her wardrobe. It was how she spoke. Gone was the soft hesitation. Now when Elise entered a boardroom, she didn't ask for permission. She took the lead. She walked into investor meetings with data, vision, and a presence that made silence feel like thunder. She fired vendors who failed sustainability audits, called out greenwashing in brand partnerships, turned down a $20 million collab with a luxury label because they refused to commit to traceable sourcing. When the CEO of that label called her idealistic, Elise smiled politely and said, "Then I suggest you find a cheaper dream." But no transformation is complete without confrontation. And that came at the Global Fashion Summit, held in Milan. Elise was not originally on the speaking roster. She had refused the invitation until she saw who was keynote. Jeremy Langston. He was scheduled to speak on innovation in fashion supply chains. The irony was so thick it was almost elegant. Elise didn't call, didn't threaten. She just accepted the panel offer 2 days before the event. And the moment the announcement dropped, Elise Moreau joins Milan Summit. Jeremy knew. His reign was over. The summit was a sea of luxury and legacy, old money, new fame, greenwashed panels and photo ops. And then Elise walked in, not through the front entrance, but down the center aisle, halfway through Jeremy's presentation. The entire room turned. Jeremy stuttered on stage. His slides flickered. Madison, seated in the front row, went stiff. Elise didn't break stride. She took her seat on stage, folded one leg over the other, and waited. When the moderator opened the panel, Jeremy spoke first. "We're here to talk about the future," he said, voice slightly tight, "and how technology can empower fashion responsibly." Elise tilted her head, then smiled. "Responsibility," she said, "isn't a feature. It's a foundation. And if you need a PR team to explain your ethics, you don't have any." Gasps, laughter. The moderator fumbled. "Miss Moreau, could you expand?" Elise leaned forward. "Fashion isn't dying. It's evolving. And those clinging to the illusion that visibility equals value, they'll be relics, not legends." Jeremy opened his mouth, but no words came. The room applauded. That night, the moment went viral. Clips of Elise's panel circulated with captions like, "She didn't come to speak, she came to end him." Moreau turns summit into courtroom, and she wins. Jeremy released a statement days later, claiming he welcomed the discourse. But brands dropped him. Fast. Madison tried to pivot again, feminine rage, healing journey, but her image was already diluted. Meanwhile, Elise's stock rose, not in followers, in power. Universities offered her honorary doctorates. The UN invited her to co-lead textile sustainability panels. Vogue offered a column. Investors begged to join her next venture. And through it all, Elise stayed focused. Because her transformation wasn't about revenge. It was about becoming what she was always meant to be, unapologetically visible, unshakably powerful. One night, Camille asked her, Do you miss the old you? Elise smiled faintly. She built the foundation, she said, but I'm the one who will finish the empire. And with that, she turned to her vision board, now filled with blueprints, fabrics, faces of girls she planned to mentor. Because Elise didn't rise from the ashes, she set the match. It was the most anticipated event of the year. The Global Fashion Council's Centennial Gala, held at the Château de Vaux-le-Vicomte in France, a palace fit for emperors, royalty, and titans of industry. This wasn't just a party. It was a statement. The kind of night where legacies are cemented, alliances are born, and careers are either reborn or buried. And this year it wasn't just about fashion, it was about reckoning. The guest list had leaked 2 weeks earlier somehow, and the industry was already ablaze. Lucien Grant was confirmed as host. Every major fashion house CEO was attending. Editors, philanthropists, royals, and of course, Jeremy Langston and Madison Reeve. What no one expected. Elise Moreau to walk in with Aurélien Veyron, the enigmatic CEO of Noir Holdings, France's largest private luxury conglomerate. He rarely appeared in public. Rumor had it he was courted by LVMH, but turned down a $500 million merger out of boredom. Elise had met him 6 months earlier quietly after he read her sustainability paper and asked to discuss fabrics over espresso. That espresso turned into strategy. Strategy turned into investment. And now, he was her partner. So when they stepped onto the grand marble steps of the chateau, the world took a breath. Elise wore crimson, deep and dangerous. The gown was structured like armor, designed by a Ghanaian prodigy Elise personally mentored. Her hair was swept back in a sleek knot, lips bold, no necklace, no earrings, just presence. Aurélien, in a minimalist charcoal tuxedo, stood beside her like a king who had found his equal, not a trophy. The cameras went wild. Inside, whispers erupted like fireworks. Is that Aurélien? She brought Veyron? Is this a power move? It wasn't a move, it was a message. During dinner, Lucien raised a toast to a century of fashion and to the future, led not just by visionaries, but by forces. Elise nodded politely. Across the room, Jeremy twitched. He and Madison sat 3 tables away. She looked irritated, scrolling through her phone like she was avoiding reality. Jeremy, in a pale blue suit, forced a smile whenever someone spoke to him. But his eyes never left Elise. Then came the main event. The stage lit up. Lucien stepped forward. This year, we're not just honoring design, we're honoring integrity, leadership, and the courage to change what we tolerate. He turned. Elise Moreau, would you join me? The room thundered with applause. Jeremy clenched his glass so hard it cracked. Madison whispered, "Don't, just stay seated." But Jeremy stood. As Elise walked toward the stage, tall and unbothered, Jeremy cut across the ballroom, grabbing a mic from a waiter and stepping onto the stage beside her. "Before we continue," he said, voice tense but controlled, "I'd like to say a few words." The room froze. Lucien narrowed his eyes. Elise didn't flinch. "I think it's important," Jeremy said, "that we remember where innovation starts. It starts with risk, with visibility, with disruption. And with theft," Elise said, her voice sharp but calm. The crowd gasped. Jeremy froze. "I'm sorry," he said. Elise turned to face him. "You want to talk disruption? Let's talk ethics. Would you like to explain how your team accessed prototype files from the Red Line's shared servers 2 years ago?" Jeremy's face went blank. "That was a system error." "It was a breach," Elise said. "One traced to a freelance developer you paid under the table, but you know that already. We have the signed deposition." Madison turned pale. Jeremy stumbled. That's private litigation," Elise raised her hand. "We could have kept it private, but you brought this public, Jeremy. Remember the rooftop? Remember your little speech?" The room was silent. No breathing, no movement. Elise stepped forward. "So here's my speech. I'm not here to play nice. I'm not here to rebuild. I'm here to take back what was stolen. And to remind everyone in this room, we are not here by accident." She turned to the audience. "You built systems that rewarded loud men and silenced quiet women. But we're done whispering." Applause began, slow, then rising. Lucien smiled. "That's our future." Elise stepped back. Jeremy remained frozen. No one applauded for him. Madison disappeared minutes later, slipping out the side exit with her publicist whispering damage control plans. Jeremy left through the back. Alone. And Elise? She stayed, danced, laughed, took photos with emerging designers, funders, world leaders. She wasn't just reclaiming the narrative. She was rewriting the entire industry. The next morning, every headline screamed the same message. Elise destroys X on stage and becomes the face of fashion's future. Langston exposed at gala. Moreau named global council chair. Elise and Veyron, the power duo we didn't know we needed. But Elise didn't care about headlines anymore. She had already won. Because this time, she didn't win by surviving. She won by walking straight into the fire and setting it ablaze. The story of Elise Moreau didn't end with a gala. It didn't fade out with a slow-motion applause or a closing shot of her silhouette under chandelier light. Because Elise's real victory was never about Jeremy, Madison, Vogue, or even fashion. It was about power reclaimed. It was about the quiet woman they underestimated becoming the voice the world couldn't ignore. And now, as her name appeared on lecture halls, government task forces, and international reform panels, people began asking a new question. How did she do it? They thought it was strategy, or money, or connections. But it wasn't. It was belief. It was Elise waking up every morning, even when she couldn't breathe, and whispering, just one step. It was choosing silence, not as weakness, but as observation. It was letting the world bury her, only so she could bloom deeper in the soil they threw on her name. Her story became a blueprint for every woman told she was too much, too cold, too quiet. And she began to tell it, not in interviews or sound bites, but through action. She founded the Muse Initiative, the global mentorship network for young women in underfunded creative fields. She opened ateliers in Nairobi, Mumbai, São Paulo, each one doubling as a free design school. She passed a law in France mandating supply chain transparency for all fashion imports, backed by both the government and private conglomerates. She did what no one thought she would. She turned pain into policy. And one day, when a student from Dakar asked her during a roundtable, "How do you forgive betrayal like that?" Elise paused, then smiled gently. "You don't forgive betrayal," she said. "You outgrow it, you outbuild it, you rise so high that it can't reach you, even on its loudest day." That moment became a quote, tattooed, shared, etched onto journals. Because Elise Moreau wasn't just a comeback, she was a warning to every man who thought a ring could silence a woman, to every system that mistook compliance for incapacity, to every friend who smiled while plotting her replacement. Elise proved that women don't break, they reshape, they rebuild from fractures, stronger, sharper, smarter. They rise, not to be worshipped, but to lead. And they do it without needing to scream, because when a woman knows her worth, she becomes unstoppable. A year after the gala, Elise stood before a crowd of 20,000 at the UN Women's Assembly in Geneva. She wore a plain white suit, no designer label, just the stitched crest of her late mother's initials on the cuff. Her voice, clear. Her message, eternal. "I am not here as a victim," she began. "I am here as a survivor, a builder, and a reminder. A reminder that what breaks you in one season can crown you in the next. A reminder that being underestimated is not a disadvantage, it's a disguise. And a reminder that being left behind doesn't mean you're behind. It means you're free. Free to rise, free to create, free to become the version of yourself that no one saw coming because they were too busy watching someone else." The room rose to their feet, tears, applause, silence broken by awe, because it wasn't just Elise they saw. It was every woman who had ever been discarded, disrespected, dismissed, and finally recognized. Backstage, Lucien approached her. "You did it," he said softly. Elise smiled. "We did." Camille, now her executive director, handed her the next day's itinerary. Paris, then São Paulo, then Tokyo. Elise nodded. "Let's build." She turned to Aurélien, who stood quietly, proud, respectful, never overshadowing. "You still sure about this madness?" she teased. He leaned in. "I wasn't drawn to your sanity." They both laughed. And then Elise stepped outside. The wind was soft, the world loud, but she was louder. Without a scream, without revenge, just presence, just impact, just Elise. And so, to every woman reading this, you are not fragile. You are not replaceable. You are not someone's stepping stone, someone's silence, someone's shadow. You are the storm they didn't see coming. You are the story they tried to erase and failed. And your power? It's not in your pain. It's in what you do with it. So rise. Even if your voice shakes, even if you're alone, even if no one claps, rise anyway. Because when you finally stop waiting for someone to crown you, you'll remember. You were always the queen,